Hello, I am Dr. Eric Wesselmann, psychology professor, full-time nerd. Right now I'm actually doing research on the psychology of media, particularly film, horror films being my jam. I'm doing a lot of volunteer work with our local town-owned theater, the Normal Theater, as well as Severn. I'm here the first time in the Brooks basement, but it likely won't be the last, if for no other reason than I only made it through probably a third of the collection. Night of the Creeps. Thrill Me. Just a really fun mixture of sci-fi humor, horror, all thrown up in a blender with a loving, playful nostalgia. They also have a reference to Stryper, the 1980s Christian metal band. We have the very, very sexy Jake Gyllenhaal in Donnie Darko. Why are you wearing that stupid human suit? I don't even know where to begin with this film. First time I saw it, I'm like, I'm not really quite sure what to make of it. I actually saw it here in Bloomington Normal as a college student in 2002, 2003, back at the old University Cinemas, which was across the railroad tracks. Now it's an apartment building. But they would do Friday and Saturday midnight movie showings for $2. So during the week, I would go to the Normal Theater for 2 or 3 nights. Then on the weekends, I would go to see the midnight movies. And if you actually watch the commentary, they actually do describe it as sort of a superhero type homage. That Donnie Darko makes a joke during it, how do you know I'm not a superhero or something like that? It's been a few years since I've seen it, but that was actually how the folks making the film were kind of viewing this. And of course, you can't go wrong with the mid to late 80s post-punk soundtrack. A documentary from Severn, that's Sexploitation. Now, I'm a big fan of offbeat documentaries. My special interests will drag me to different areas that I want to learn about. A handful of years ago, I was like, what the hell exactly is an exploitation film? But this is just a really great historical piece for people who are interested in the variety of exploitation genres that would fall within sexploitation. So you've got the roughies, the nudie cuties, you got the hygiene films, which are always fun, Birth of a Baby, even some burlesque, when burlesque got moved from live performances to being recorded and shipped around to different grindhouses. And of course, it has lots of interviews from both the one, the only David F. Freeman, and the other one, the only Frank Henenlotter. Give Severn your money. All right, the rest of these are all horror, but now I'm going to go for something a little bit more potentially highbrow, a little bit more recognizable, or not. That is Michael Powell's Peeping Tom, which was released about a half a year to maybe a year before Psycho. There's a lot of overlap, and there's a lot of interesting discussion around this because this film ruined Michael Powell's career. He just became persona non grata, and there are some nuances. And I think my personal hot take is that one of the reasons why people really had a hard time with Peeping Tom and they didn't have a hard time with Psycho is because you know from the beginning who the killer is, and you are forced to have his perspective the entire time, right? And so, because in many ways, both Anthony Perkins and then Carl Bohm were both very sympathetic and were both very much psychologically abused, which led them to do what they ultimately did in the film. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Psycho, yes, Norman Bates is the killer. Again, here, the entire time, it's just like you are forced to see this likable, sympathetic person who's also doing horrible things. I'm convinced that that's one of the main reasons why critics panned it so much, is that they had never seen that before, they couldn't handle it. Thank you to Martin Scorsese, who actually championed this film and got some cred to Michael Powell. I can't remember if it was before or after he died, but certainly kind of resurrected the critical and commercial success of this film, and Criterion has a wonderful version of it. All right, I'm going to pivot to the VHS. Dana Andrews in Curse of the Demon. One of those films that is not part of the quote-unquote full-on folk horror British canon, but in terms of like the sort of holy or unholy trinity of what started this folk horror genre, it very much is considered to be sort of a next tier. It's got elements of it. It was also known as Night of the Demon. I think Night of the Demon might have been the UK release. Not to be confused with the other Night of the Demon that Severn's got, which involves cryptids who like to remove important parts of certain people's anatomy. Or Night of the Demons with the one, the only Linnea Quigley, and a very nice plug for any Bauhaus fans out there. Some Stigmata Martyr. They purposely didn't want to show the demon because that was part of how the original story ended. Was it was kind of like are these people really crazy? Is it really supernatural? They wanted it to be ambiguous. Production company, however, had other plans. They thought they really wanted to have that in there, so they created this really huge, like, hokey looking monster. And so they're all at the premiere, and then suddenly the monster shows up not once but at least twice, and they're like, did you shoot that? Did we create that? What the hell? Another film that I really have come to appreciate that I didn't growing up was Cherry Falls. So I was a huge slasher fan growing up. And then there was that time in the early 2000s where horror became really glossy and very popular and not particularly edgy in the same way. And so there were a lot of films that I kind of just let go by. This is one that I was like, oh, it seems so ridiculously cheesy. But I actually watched it, and it's brilliant. It's really, really brilliant. And it breaks its own rules. Just like Scream breaks its rules, so does Cherry Falls. That may be another conversation for another time. But it's one of those things where if you haven't seen it, it really has some interesting perspectives. Return to Horror High. You can fight me on this. This is by far the best performance I've seen from George Clooney, next to Return of the Killer Tomatoes. I want this soundtrack. It's got amazing songs that are very much like set to that late 80s type of metal and pop, but the lyrics were made for the film and kind of ridiculous, tongue-in-cheek. Please, whoever owns the rights to that, now that we're doing all of these like re-releases of soundtracks on vinyl, cassette, or CD, right? I just finally got the soundtracks to the Prom Night 3 and 4, Prom Night 4 soundtrack. Awesome. Please, companies out there, do this. Thank you for your time, for letting me nerd out. Paul, thank you for inviting me to the Brooks Basement. I hope that I come back again because I'm just going to get lost among all of this wondrous physical media. Buy physical media. Also, particularly with the boutique companies, it's good to give them money. Please feel free to check out my YouTube channel, Digital Golgotha Productions, if you want to see more of my nerdy ramblings, and come back to the basement sometime soon.